everyone. Welcome back to Innovation Nation. Today, I'm excited to have John Nemerofsky with me. He's from Sage Integration. And John, if you can please introduce yourself, that'd be great.
Everybody, this is John Nemerofsky from Sage Integration. I'm thrilled to be here. Sarah, thanks for having me.
Of course. John, tell us a little bit about your position today and your background within the security industry.
Absolutely, Sarah, thanks. So today I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Sage Integration. Sage is a 32-year-old business, and I've been around the industry for about the same amount of time. Began a startup in '94 out of Philadelphia, and we were fortunate to grow the business to north of $180 million revenue before exiting. And I've been around doing some consulting for different manufacturers and integrators before, and Sage really their mission and vision really caught my eye, so I was thrilled to join the team.
Thank you, John. And I think it's very fitting because today we're going to talk about the integration business, right? And with your experience seeing so much evolution, and today with Corona, it's with coronavirus being so prevalent, it's definitely put a damper onto a lot of the relationships that we've had with our end users, because it's hard for us to physically go out, be in person, and keep the relationship strong. And so obviously there's a lot I want to ask you about when it comes to the industry and your experience, but I want to start with the idea of today, like how we envision what an integrator is like today versus yesterday, and where the future of integration is going. If you can share with us and the listeners your perspective on like some of the largest changes that you've seen in the recent, especially because of coronavirus, I'd love to hear your perspective.
Sure. So the past as an integrators are very project driven, break and fix driven. In today's integration world, integrators had to change. And as we look at it at Sage, there's really three things we're built on. People, so hiring the best people. Processes, so putting best practices in place, and world-class processes. And partners, so choosing the right technology partners out there. So the best access control platforms, the best IoT platforms, the best cyber partners to deliver results to the end user. And I think what's happened along that way from the project-based business and the break and fix has now become more embedded partnerships with companies that help you bring solutions, because when you embed your personnel with an end user, it helps you understand their business operations, their security operations, and then helps you innovate for that customer instead of just provide solutions and bids as they ask for them.
Yeah, that's a really good, efficient way, I think, to describe it, because I feel like for many years it's been a one size fits all model, where when I first came into the industry, which was not too long ago, I remember a lot of my frustrations that customers would share with me was always about the people from before. It was always about the integrator that they dealt with prior. And what I noticed was that the integrators, from the feedback I'd hear from customers, was they would do what they thought was right? And that it was never about what the end user truly needed. And then oftentimes the end user ended up with a system that was either broken, not fully literally integrated. There were things left on the table that had never been taken care of. And then quite often my new relationship with that end user was the break and fix. It was not us necessarily breaking it, but it was broken and we came in to fix it. And one of the biggest challenges that I saw was that it doesn't take like a short amount of time to get to know an end user. To your point, John, you have to understand the business of the end user and what makes sense for them. So, over a 5-year period, sometimes it would even take us over 3 years just to get on to a good point where we can really start to innovate. Because in the meantime, we were focused solely on fixing what was left from behind or what was left from before. And I want to touch on, Sage and John, your method when it comes to technology and how you guys pick the right partners.
Yeah. So Sarah, if it's okay, I'd like to just back us up a little bit to tell you how Sage got to the partnership. So,
yeah.
Sage is a new name to the industry. March 2nd, 2020 is the first anybody's heard of Sage Integration. But the story takes us back a few years to when Eric Fraser, our CEO, left a 25-year career on Wall Street and made an investment with his partner Kevin Ramsire from Sire Capital in a vision analytics business. And at that point, they were fortunate enough to win a contract with a large oil replacement company, Valvoline, and they wanted to track customer experience by putting cameras in. So Eric and Kevin, quickly after running this 2,000 store project, went out to find what was called a security systems integrator. They interviewed 18 integrators, selected 6, whose names I won't say on this podcast, but those 6 were each awarded 3 stores. And what Kevin and Eric got back were 18 non-functional systems. They scratched their head and said, we should either run away from this security integration space or run right towards it. So to do that, they decided to run right towards it, but they want to impact it in a big way. So when they ran towards it, they wanted to find a financial partner. They looked at banks, they looked at private equity, they looked at venture capital, and they found one in Talisman Capital Partners, which is a private equity family office that manages the family wealth of the Walter family. And together they invested and in 2018 made their first acquisition in Kent, Ohio, of a systems integration business called ASCO Security Consultants. And that was the launch of ASCO into a new realm of security systems integration. A year later, they made another acquisition in 2019 of a company in Atlanta, Georgia called DTS Security. Now with 2 disparate brands, they brought together on March 2nd, 2020, Sage Integration. And Sage was a name that was thought through in some long sessions of branding. But when we thought about what makes companies good, what makes companies great, good companies take care of the customer. Great companies take care of the employees, and they take care of everything else. So our logo is the tip of the spear, and we refer to our employees as the tip of the spear. And that's really how Sage is launched. We were supposed to do an official launch at ISC West. Obviously, that never happened. So a virtual launch happened on March 2nd, 2020. The quick story on Sage, and every day we're fortunate enough to have almost 80% of our employees embedded in clients' accounts. So it helps us understand their business operations, their security operations, and then helps us bring in great partners to help innovate, to solve problems, reduce program expenses, and make programs more efficient.
So thank you, John, by the way. I realized I know a lot of the history of Sage from working with you and having seen it since inception. But that's great so the listeners understand the difference, because in the industry, we're used to the large integrators, maybe, the large JCIs of this world, or the ones that are the small mom and pop shops, but we have very few in the middle, and we have very few that do what you guys do. And if you can help, so we talk about taking care of the customer is what make it good. And then having the best employees and taking care of your employees is what makes you great. Can you help us understand a little bit, before we get onto the technology topic, help us understand what makes it so different? You're talking about embedding within the end user. Help me understand what that means.
So there are services to provide an end user. Some simple ones are project management, a service technician on site. But maybe we have a full-time embedded person that takes care of the customer's VMS platform. Maybe a full-time embedded person that keeps CAD drawings up to date for that client. Maybe a full-time service manager inside that client. If the client's got thousands of sites or just large campus sites in many cities and many countries. So outside of just the service technician embedded in that account, it could be project managers that made things more efficient. You watch the traditional integration model and they assign a project manager to each project. But if you know and you've become trusted and close enough with your client, and your client is using 6,000 hours a year of project management, why have 5 or 6 different project managers touch the account when 3 could work on it full time and create better communications for the customer, create better results, create better efficiencies for everybody along the way?
So that's a good example, John, because I remember back in my days when I was doing integration, one of my biggest frustrations, just as a salesperson who was supposed to go out and quote unquote take care of the customer, was every time I'd sell a project, and this was repeat work with the same customer, I had a different PM assigned to my job. And it was one of the most frustrating things I had to deal with because I knew every in and out intricacy that I needed to know. I knew exactly how to keep it consistent, how many licenses we need, what systems were out there, what we were going to work off of. And every time we had to teach a new PM how to deploy at that specific customer site. And I wish, back then, if we had that model where you had not just the same customer, but the same PM, it would just have made so much more sense. We would have had a more successful job too, and we would have been able to give labor back, right? Or our teams would have more time to do it. And so it's very interesting how you guys really understand that and are going, making that the future now of integration, which I think is a good thing. I think our industry needs it. We need people like yourselves, John, who are going to kind of pave that path, because there's a lot of challenges, I think, too, right now with coronavirus, where a lot of integrators are used to that in-person interaction and depend on that, right? To have the strong relationship. And unless you have someone full-time embedded, how else are you going to build that? Well, now everything's virtual, right? And if you didn't have that relationship ahead of time to then make the virtual transition easy, good luck. I mean, it's hard because it's really hard to now really build that just through a computer,
Yep, you're so right, Sarah.
And you guys started like at the inception of this virus. I mean, March is when it happened for most people, which is just mind blowing how successful you guys have been and been able to do it, even with coronavirus being such a sore for everybody.
Yeah, it's been challenging, Sarah. We launched the first organic sales effort in Sage history because our ASCO security consultant acquisition and our DTS acquisition didn't bring to us any salespeople. Launched and hired our organic sales team in the beginning of 2020 just to run into coronavirus and challenges in meeting new clients. So we had a pivot right away, and our strategy came about in another unique play that I haven't seen anybody else doing on the integration side yet, is in the lack of the ability to see people at trade shows and face-to-face meetings, so many in-mails coming through social media, challenging to get a return or a meeting. So we pivoted to an account-based marketing tool that we utilize called Terminus that enabled us to find clients that wanted to talk to us, so to move that marketing qualified lead to a sales qualified lead, so that when a client's truly interested in speaking with us, we're able to talk to them and share with them the technologies and services we have and things that we've been able to accomplish for other clients.
So that's a good point, John. So if you can help me unpack, there's two things here I want to eventually dive into. One is how Sage themselves decides on the technologies they're going to bring to customers, but also how Sage uses technology to be successful with customers. So let's start there, because you're talking about Terminus, which is a tool you guys are using. Can you dive into a little bit around how you've enabled your own internal people with technology and what that looks like for your teams?
So, as we had so many of the front office staff, our sales team working from home, as everybody started in February, March, and you did those first Zoom or team calls, everybody was all washed out, and they had bad lighting and bad volume and bad hearing. And can you hear me now? Like, how many times was that said on a Zoom call for the first couple of months? So we invested in some training for both teams. We invested in technology for each of the people that were working remotely, so they had the best cameras, the best lighting, the best headsets, the best microphones, and then training on how to use them, how to move from Teams to Zoom, and all the challenges. As I say that, I'm sitting in a new office that I shared with you earlier that we just moved into, so I don't have any of those things yet.
Yeah.
As we just moved into our new Dallas office. But those are some of the things we did for our team to get them ready to go. And then as we realized the challenges of being a salesperson or a remote employee in this manner, especially on the sales front, what tools could we give them? So we did some additional online advertising. We reinvested in a CRM tool. But when we started to really dig deep in how are we going to get appointments and new appointments with customers, prospective customers that want to see us, we looked into account-based marketing so that if somebody was coming to our website, we'd be able to grab their information, use some analytics to see if they were pulling down a white paper, a case study, whether it's on OSDP or it's on a deployment we've done for our client with thermal imaging, or whether it's on facial recognition or facial authentication, and they're interested in seeing that on our website. After they've come back so many times, we're using an analytics tool called Bombora that tells us, that gives them a rating, helps us say, hey, this has moved from a marketing qualified lead to a sales qualified lead. Now sales can follow up with somebody that actually wants to speak with them instead of piling on like everybody else in mail and voicemail and email.
So really quickly, just to touch on, and then we can move into the next part of the conversation, but what you're describing is it's not like it's, not like that concept hasn't existed before. Terminus is a tool that's been around for many years for a reason. And it's really cool, John, to hear you talk about this, because I keep thinking about the tech world when you describe this sales process that you're following, because this is very common in tech, right? And different types of leads and demand generation and using a good CRM and really understanding the benefit of those tools internally. And it's very interesting because quite often, even today still, there's so many integrators still working off spreadsheets. And it's mind blowing to me because we're in Innovation Nation today as the podcast, right? So the idea is to talk about technology, but an area, in this business that really, really, really needs to innovate is the integration world.
Yeah, spot on, Sarah. It really started for us when you talk about integrators working with spreadsheets. We acquired two that were working that way. And we quickly moved them to an ERP solution that we integrated together that does our quoting through WeSuite, our financial evaluations and P&L and balance sheets through Sedona, and then a field service unit to track service and time, and right, because our field people are still measurable in utilization and efficiency and client satisfaction. That's what we look for each day. So it really, the CRM, your ERP, and like Terminus are really, as we talked about early on, is people, process, and your systems are really help hold your process together, and then partners.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's something I'm sure we can spend lots of time around is that whole concept of the Excel sheet, because I still remember when I was an integrator, even up until when I left to join my new company, Alcatraz, I was still getting quotes from manufacturers on spreadsheets. And it was almost a challenge for me to even interact with it to know what I'm getting quoted, because I was just so used to, I guess you could say now it's different because with Alcatraz, like everything we do is online and everything is, you get a link for your quote. You don't get a spreadsheet, right? And it's like we're able to be such a small sales team, but be so impactful and so effective because we're truly utilizing the tools in every way you can imagine. And if we were able to do that prior, I feel like things would have just been so much easier. And I think, John, you hit on a good point. You guys didn't just invest in the best technologies for your people, but you invested in the training and the learning curve, because often we don't innovate because of that, right? Or maybe because we don't have the right resources to learn how to innovate, or when we have to, or we're confronted, what about my training? I'm not going to go read a 1,000-page manual on how to open the application. It's something I think our business also needs more of. We need more training back to the integrators, just so they can actually understand what's going on and not just be challenged with having to bring new technology, but not know really how to use it properly,
Exactly. So
yeah. Well, I want to now kind of transition to the discussion around, technology, having the right tech partners, and then bringing that to the end user. So how does Sage, if it was, with you, John, and your leadership, how do you guys typically make your decision on which technology you feel is what you want to bring to an end user?
It can happen in a couple ways. Sometimes a client has found something that they want to vet, and they bring that to us. Sometimes we search out a certain technology partner, and that's a big thing at Sage, so that we don't have any vendors. We have technology partners. We have subcontract partners. We have manufacturer rep firm partners. We have distribution partners. So we really have built a culture around that. So there's no vendors that exist in our world. And I guess the third way is once it's coming through Sage, we've developed a product review committee. And that product review committee will hear the information about a technology partner. We'll ask ourselves, do we already have something that does this? And do we need another one, right? Because Sarah, you and I talked about training and how many technologies can you train on, right? You want to be the best at delivering. So if we don't have one, then we'll move forward. Does the technology work? We test it. Sometimes we pilot it at a client site. Sometimes we just test it internally in our testing lab. Is there a business model for this? Can we resell it? Are we just going to sell it to one customer and never sell it again? After all those things, it gets stamped. And then we start asking questions, okay, how do we train our technical staff on deploying? How do we train our sales staff on selling? How do we tie our marketing team in to market over our sales force through Terminus to create customer demand to drive back leads to our sales team? That's really the Sage process and how we review a product and pick a solution that solves challenges for our existing customers and sometimes new customers.
Wow. Okay. So there were a lot of steps to that, first of all. Let's just admit, like, that wasn't like the vendor relationship is very different. When I was working at JCI, for example, I had too many vendors to even think about. I couldn't, the amount of different types of cameras and analytics and options of access controls I could pick from, it was almost overwhelming at times, right? It was solely up to me to decide which one did I want to use for that end user unless they already had something existing. And so I love how you just broke that down into 3 parts. That's really important because having that process in place as the integrator shows that you're doing the due diligence for the end user.
Correct. You know, if you don't and you put a product in, and now, Sarah, as you know, we're partnering with Alcatraz to replace an on-prem facial recognition product that failed our client in 62 U.S. cities and 9 foreign countries. Wow, that's a big, heavy lift. Now, fortunately, the client picked that product before we arrived on site 4 years ago, and we're just there now solving the client's problems with a great technology that helps them innovate and do far more than they could with the on-prem solution. And obviously, not here to bash any former technology partners, but this is a big uplift for the client, right? But they did exactly that. We vetted it. They piloted it on site. And as you get into some of these Fortune 15 companies, the IT vetting process sometimes takes longer than we could imagine. Instead of 30 days or 60 days, which will vet a technology, and they take 8 or 9 months sometimes because they have so much to go through.
Yeah, it's the IT process, Sean, is its own animal. Yeah, you're great. I mean, shameless plug about Alcatraz, but you're right. We are partners. We are going through that process with you guys. And I will say it's not the first IT process that's being done. I mean, as working with the Fortune 200, almost all of them require an IT review. And we all know that once with physical security entities, when IT starts getting involved, it's never their favorite thing to necessarily have to be a part of. But I think what's interesting, and one of the cool things I've actually been noticing, is that when you find the right technologies to bring to the end user, those processes become a lot easier for the end user. And when you find the technologies that are built properly, and I'm not trying to just put Alcatraz on a pedestal here, but given that we were built by Silicon Valley people who understand cloud, who understand IT, who designed for the data center, right? For the large enterprise data center, going to IT now with physical security is so much easier. And the physical security teams end up getting along with IT and they become friends. And then IT says, wait, we actually love this. It passed all of our testing. Can we get some on our IDF doors or our MDF doors, right? That whole process becomes so much better. And then people can now come together over technology instead of stumbling over it.
Spot on, Sarah. The other thing when IT gets involved, talking about the cloud becomes much easier. So what had been for years as an integrator, there were on-prem solutions and cloud was sometimes considered. Now in conversations with IT, cloud is mostly considered. And although the time to get through an IT review at some of the 200, 500 companies takes a little longer. Traditionally takes you to the cloud, whether you're talking about facial recognition or authentication or weapons detection. The cloud solution typically wins out when IT gets involved.
Yeah, totally spot on. And the cloud is obviously the future. That's another conversation, probably for another time, talking about on-prem versus cloud and that whole situation, because I'd say probably still a majority of this industry, a majority of the systems that our industry is deployed are still on-prem. And
so if the integrator didn't learn through COVID how important recurring monthly revenue is, they surely know now that whether it comes to you from embedded personnel or hosted systems, software support agreements, or managed systems, you're missing it, right? Because everybody was challenged during this time to keep their project run rates to cover their cost and their cost of labor. If they didn't have large portions of embedded personnel, you surely had to fall back on your recurring monthly revenue or cloud-based system.
Absolutely. And the managed service concept, recurring revenue, you're right, John. That's, I think, where the future really, that's where a lot of the industries are today, actually. And that is the future of the security industry. There's not enough of it today. You know, I will say when I bring up the concepts of SaaS or software as a service or hardware as a service to people, new partners, and, you know, my hat of Alcatraz is still kind of on while I'm also trying to keep this agnostic. But at the end of the day, you know, being an integrator myself, I would always wonder, like, why didn't we have more SaaS in this business? Like, I had so many friends from Cal Poly who went to go work in tech and were bringing home huge paychecks all the time, had this predictable commission that they were making because they sold these software agreements. And I never understood that. Like, we had SSAs in our business, but I couldn't understand why we didn't have that model. And it was only because I was surrounded by it by my friends and seeing, you know, how they were benefiting from it. But our industry couldn't need more of it. And today and yesterday are the days when we should have started bringing it in, because I think when I now talk to a lot of the integrators who have been around for maybe, you know, who have been around for a while and haven't really changed much and are just kind of getting by right now. If you had that model in place with a recurring and a contract with a customer with a long-term contract, long-term relationship, you wouldn't be getting on and getting off a job. You would know what to expect.
So many, I agree with you. You know, there's so many things around cloud that we use, right? So our project management tools, Smartsheets, is cloud-based. Our engineering tools with Design Automator is cloud-based. Our ERP is cloud-based. So many of tools we use in our business are cloud-based. Why not with the client? For the traditional integrator that was selling on-prem for the last 20 years, making that pivot, you know, is gradual, right? To start with devices attached to your on-prem system that are cloud-based, embedded personnel, mobile credentials. I don't think that you're going to see your integrator already all of a sudden make a swing to enterprise cloud-based access and video unless they put a strategy together. And I've given a couple of talks recently to PSA leadership, PSA marketing, and to SIA in a podcast around the cloud and innovations and creating recurring revenue strategy.
John, I would love to, because I know we're about at the top of the hour, the time we had set for this conversation today, I would like to just kind of make this an informal / formal invitation to bring you back at some point, because I would love to have you join us and talk about that in and of itself, the cloud, and how we can be using more of that with the end users, because I truly think that deserves its own episode. Because I think right now, John, a lot of the industry knows about it. They know what it is, they've heard about it, but maybe they just either don't know how to get there or aren't really willing or ready or understand the reason why they should.
Love to join you for that, Sarah.
Yeah. And then obviously, maybe eventually we'll have to spin off and talk about AI, because this concept of cloud, I also have noticed, is very prevalent around the concept of artificial intelligence. And you just referenced a lot of business tools that you're using internally that I'm sure are also using AI. The way you described the website and knowing if they hit OSDP white paper versus they're touching, another project you did for a customer, that's all computing behind the scenes, giving your salespeople tools to now go be successful with.
Absolutely.
So it's kind of cool stuff what you guys are doing. Well, John, thank you so much for coming today and joining me. I know everybody in the industry knows who you are, so they're going to be, I'm sure, very excited to hear this conversation. Are there any last thoughts, or what's the best way if somebody wants to reach out and meet you or meet Sage? How can they do that?
Yep, absolutely. So thank you first for having me, Sarah. This was wonderful and a lot of fun. They can email me at jnemerofsky@sageintegration.com. They can reach me on my mobile phone. I'm easily accessible, 732-33314. If they want to learn more about Sage, it's just sageintegration.com.
Awesome. Thank you. And then, of course, LinkedIn, right? We're very active on
LinkedIn. Yeah.
LinkedIn is the spot. So this will be posted there, and I'll get you the links when we're done. And once again, John, thank you so much for coming in today.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank
Great
you.
holiday.